Welcome back. In this part, we're going to explore some charting capabilities. We got the basic structure of our dashboard. We got our client, Lucy, the sales manager, happy. But we want to pay more attention to different kinds of visualizations and charting. So let's move to Excel again. And we have a pivot similar to other pivots we were doing before. In this case, I have categories and subcategories on rows, and I have a filter on years that allow me to switch between year to year. Nothing special so far. Now, I know that I can attach to each pivot table a pivot chart. And I do that by clicking the pivot chart here. And I know that I have different options of creating visualizations. Now, in my last discussion with Lucy, she mentioned a very specific kind of visualization she was interested. She wanted to see some structure, some hierarchical representation of the data. We have larger parts like categories and smaller parts within those categories. So I noticed a few times before that my good friend here is the Tell Me feature. Remember, this is a relatively new feature. You wouldn't find it in other versions. And also, I'm going to now show you some features which are actually very new. So the types of charts that I'm going to use are new to Excel 2016 and even to the further updates after the original release of 2016. So hierarchical. Let's see what Excel has to say. I start typing hierarchical, and immediately the Tell Me feature says you can insert a hierarchy chart. There are two of them, a tree map and a sunburst. I click on it, and immediately I get an error saying you cannot create this chart type with data inside a pivot table. Oh, that's not a good thing to find at this point. And actually, this is part of a bigger kind of limitation that not every chart can be used that is known to Excel can be used as a pivot chart. So not every chart can use data within a pivot. For example, there are others which, for example, the scatter charts. And the moment I try to use this while I'm on the pivot, it tells me you cannot create this chart. Same error message I was getting before. And so there's, and I still want to use this kind of hierarchical structure. So I can actually use or reuse the technique that we used in the previous part of creating data summarizing data from the detailed table, not with the pivot, but with expressions. And once this is done with expressions, I will be able to utilize those new chart types. By the way, those chart types are planned to be supported as pivot charts. So you should expect in further down version of Excel that those charts will be supported as pivot charts, but there's still going to be others that are not going to be. And I might need to do the same thing of creating the data with formulas instead of a pivot table. So if you remember, I started last time copying the pivot to a regular range just to have the regular structure. But here, before I do that, I want to change a little bit the structure of the pivot. We're going to go to an area of the ribbon that we didn't see before. Under Pivot Table Tools, we used quite a few of the features of the Analyze, but we didn't see that there is also a Design. And Design is something that enables us to apply styles. And also, there's something called the Report Layout. I'm going to use a record layout that's called Tabular. So this is the way it's going to be. So instead of, if I undo it, you see that the categories and the subcategories are all in the same column, column D in this case, and the subcategory, which is nested within, is a little bit shifted in. But in the tabular way, each one of them occupies its own column, and this is the way I want it. Now, another thing that I want to change is that I want to repeat all item labels. I want to have for each row the categories to be repeated. You will understand in a moment why do I need it. Another thing that I want is actually I want to remove the subtotals. So I can right-click on the subtotal and just uncheck it. And also I don't need the grand total, so I can actually do the same for grand totals. And that's it. So this could be the basis of the report that I'm going to use for my hierarchical chart. So again, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it as values, increase a little bit the width of the columns, apply a format in an Excel way, not in the pivot way. And I don't, well, sorry, actually I don't need, the numbers will be recreated by me as the SUMIFs function, remember? So now I can start doing the SUMIF function, SUMIFs function. That will say SUMIFs. It will be a little bit simpler because I only have something on rows and nothing on columns in this case. So again, I'm going to summarize the revenue, and I'm going to slice it or filter it by, and I can actually use subcategory because each subcategory defines the category that it comes from. So I don't need to use both the category and the subcategory. So the subcategory, and I would say that the subcategory comes from this cell, and I actually don't even need to adjust the reference to absolute or relative because I'm not going to drag this value or this expression anywhere. So, and another one that I want to use is the year, sales data year, and in this case, it's going to come from this cell here, and here I do have to push F4 to make it absolute. Okay, this is the value. It fits the value that I have in the pivot, so I'm happy. And I drag down the values, and I know that I can actually drive it using the filter from here. And again, this pivot, it just finished its function. I don't need it anymore, and I can actually again change the options not to fit the width of the columns and take it from here, cut and paste over here, so it will look really as a filter to this area. Oh, I just didn't drag it all the way. Oops. Here it is. All right, so now once this is a regular range, let's see what I'm going to do. Start writing hierarchical again, and now it tells me insert the hierarchy chart. The moment I try it, it shows me this preview. I see that I have two. I have the tree map and I have the sunburst. We'll explore each one. So now I'm going to introduce the chart, and you see this is what I call a hierarchical chart. So it shows the first column, which is the product category, as these large areas, which have the titles for them: bikes, accessories, and clothing. Within each area, there are sub-areas which belong to the subcategories, and the sizes, the relative sizes of the big areas and the smaller areas inside them are proportional to the value that is in this column. And the same thing will be true for if I change the chart type and I go from the tree map to the sunburst. Sunburst is actually a good way to show even more hierarchy, like more levels into it, but the principle is the same, only across this circle shape. And I know that I want to see what happened when I change years. So you see immediately that the chart responds. One last thing I want to test. Remember, in 2014, we only had one major category of bikes. So here it is. Now, what will happen when I click on all? We saw before what this will cause us. It will actually break everything. And remember what we did last time was that for the we introduce an if statement saying that if the value for the slicer equals, and I have to make it absolute, if it equals all, then last time I entered an asterisk value, but I won't do it. Believe me, it wouldn't work. The reason it wouldn't work in this case is that the year value is numeric. So if and the asterisk is a good wildcard to catch all values for strings. But if I want to do it for values, for numeric values, what I can do, I can actually enter as a criteria greater than 0 as a string like this. And this, and otherwise, so that's, I have to complete the if, saying if it's not equals to all, then, oops, so just use it as it is. And now I will just close one more parenthesis. And I just did it for one single row. I double click. And you see that now it actually works well with all, and also with single year. It works fine. I will not be able to use this trick as it is for selecting 2 years like 2014 and 2015, but each individual year and the total for all years. So we saw again a use of a non-pivot table approach to summarizing the data. And we saw that there are some types of charts that cannot be used as pivot charts. And we saw that there are a few new chart types that were introduced in Excel 2016. And some of them are, you can explore. There's a bunch. They're not just the hierarchical ones, but we saw that if we have hierarchy data, like here, product category, subcategory, the tree map and the sunburst can be used to visualize this kind of data. See you next time.